Welcome to Shelf Help. Today we're speaking with John McGuckin, CEO of Clio Snacks, the world's first refrigerated wrapped Greek yogurt bar. I am a frequent purchaser of these, so I am a big fan of the brand. I think John took the head seat at Clio back in 2021 as the first non-founder CEO. Roughly 3 years or so, taking the brand from about 23 million up to I think projecting 120 million or so in 2026. So some pretty rapid growth. John's got a lot of great experience in the space, was EVP of North American Sales and GM of Canada at Sabra, CEO at Tribe Mediterranean Foods, CAO at Maya Kaimal, previous Kit Print client, know those guys really well, Chief Customer Officer at Lakeview Farms, Global Chief Sales Officer at the Chia Company, so as well as a U.S. Army veteran. So long story short, knows the better for you CPG space very well. So very excited to dive into it. John, first off for the listeners that maybe aren't that familiar with Clio Snacks, love to just get quick lay of the land just in terms of kind of the quick origin story and the why behind the brand and what the core product lineup looks like. And then we'll jump in.
Sure thing. Adam, really appreciate the opportunity here to talk about Clio. So the origin story is, very interesting and certainly typical of, some great American entrepreneur stories. So our founder is Sergei Konchakovsky. He comes from Ukraine. And when he came to the United States, he came with memories of this product that he grew up with when he was a child called syrok. And what syrok is, it's sort of like a cottage cheese or a curd filled snack that's covered in chocolate. The only connection it has to Clio is that it's sort of a similar process and it looks the same, but it certainly doesn't taste the same. In any event, Sergey got into the accounting area with Palm Wonderful and with Entenmann's Bakery, but he is absolutely, this creative mind and a fiddler. So that desk wasn't going to hold him.
Sure.
So he was literally just playing around with yogurt in his fridge one night that had kind of sat for a while. He decided to cover it in chocolate and he gave it to his kids, who were, I guess, very young at the time, and they loved it. And believe it or not, that's what spurred him
Wow.
to jump into this, full-throated, invest in a small machine, in a small building, literally like a garage, right? Like the story, like the Murray Lender with Lender's Bagels, he created in his garage. So he sort of created this in his garage, and he got a van, and he actually took the product into the city and tested it with a couple different independent supermarkets in the city. And about a week went by, the phone rang, and he said, "Oh no, they're going to call me and tell me to pick up all my product." However, what happened was the product sold out.
Wow.
And the customers were delighted with it. So he started in 2016. So it's been 10 years. And it's really, for him, I think, been, quite a passion. And today he's chairman of the board. He's not integrated in the day-to-day anymore. We'll talk more about that as we go through. But, he's certainly a critical member of the board, a big owner in the company, and still provides significant creative input to our day-to-day operation. The name Clio, by the way, came about in sort of a weird way. He was in France with his wife, driving through the south of France. He stopped at a stop sign, and this car hit him from behind. And when he got out, the gentleman who hit him couldn't speak English or pretended not to speak English, and Sergey couldn't speak French. So they parted ways. Believe it or not, as they were parting ways, Sergey, who at the time was thinking about how to come up with a creative name for the company, saw that the car was called a Clio. So he looked at his wife and he said, "That's the name of our company. We're going to call it Clio." Now, what he didn't realize at the time, and an interesting turn, is that Clio is actually the Greek goddess or the Greek muse of history. So it ties back in, believe it or not, to Greek yogurt in a way that he couldn't have predicted. So anyway, that's the story. And like a lot of entrepreneurs that I've been blessed to work with, he's creative, he's dynamic, and always looking for the next idea. So, we've been blessed to have the opportunity to work together.
I think that's the best naming story I've heard yet. You've certainly got a track record of leading some of the most well-respected brands around. I imagine anytime word gets around that you may be open to the next opportunity, I'm sure you got your pick of the litter whenever word gets out. What was it about Clio that really made you pull the trigger compared to all the other opportunities I'm sure were in front of you?
Well, I think it starts with the consumer. And when I first spoke with Sergey, back in early to mid 2021, and saw the benefits that the brand held. So the consumer had fast tracked really from, in the early 2000s. I think the consumer was more about being very experiential, trying sort of exotic foods. So you think about Maya Kaimal, you think about Sabra hummus. People were sort of exploring the world through food, and people were using more olive oil and more romantic type of European dishes. But things had changed post COVID, and the culture really became one fast moving, on the go, permissibly indulgent, but I need my protein. And so it had those attributes going for it, even though it was, really in the early stages. And then when you tasted the product, just like when I was at Sabra or when I was at Maya Kamal, the product was obviously high quality and superior. And then in looking at some early data that I was able to sort of get offline, I saw that where it was in distribution, it was doing quite well. And that was with nothing in terms of marketing support or even really trade support. But beyond that, it was, meeting with Sergey, being exposed sort of to his passion. Throughout my career, I've worked with wonderful entrepreneurs. What they all have in common is this passion for their brand. So from Murray Lender to Bob Rich at Rich Products to Jerry Schreiber at J&J Snacks to Yehuda Pearl at Sabra and now and Maya at Maya Kamal and now Sergey, it just rubs off. I love that. So I was comfortable with him as the founder and really felt kinship with his passion. So the consumer, the founder, and then, the board. So when I had the opportunity to meet the board before I came here, I saw people that were just as passionate about the brand. It wasn't like an investment where, okay, we're going to invest in this company because we think it might be successful. It was an investment of people who like eat the product all day long and absolutely love the product. And every one of them is like the supposed marketing expert. Like, they know how we can take it to the next level. So I was exposed to all these folks, and between the consumer fit, the founder fit, the board fit, and the fact that it was in New Jersey, which is my home, I felt like this could be Sabra 2.0. And thankfully, to this point, that's the direction that it seems to be moving in.
That's awesome. That's amazing. For the other seasoned operators that may be listening that are thinking about taking the CEO suite at a brand that has been only founder led up until that point, what's, I don't know, one or two things that they should have top of mind or kind of, stress test in the diligence phase to make sure that it's going to be the right fit for them?
All right. So beyond, understanding where the consumer dynamic is, is the product satisfying a need? That's probably the most important thing, because if the product's not satisfying a need, it's probably not going to be successful in the long run. But I'll go back to the first piece, and that's the founder himself or herself. You have to feel, you have to buy into their vision, but they have to buy into your ability to integrate their business and take it to the next level. And that takes time. But I think when you're first interviewing, those sort of ground rules need to be established so that the expectations can be set. There's so many examples where a founder will step away and then meddle in the business, and then there'll be conflict. And then because of the conflict, the CEO goes away, the founder comes back in, and then the company is not as successful as perhaps it could have been. You go to Expo West and there's hundreds and hundreds of founders who have maybe the greatest products that you've ever seen, but they don't know how to properly integrate and scale the business. So getting that relationship right with the founder, out of the gate, and understanding those expectations are critical. And then the board and the bank, testing the relationship between the board, the founder, and the bank to make sure that all of these key constituents are supporting the brand to the level that you need it to be supported. I've been in a couple companies where there was a huge disconnect
Yeah.
and even a bad relationship, like between the bank and the board, or the bank and the founder, or the board and the founder. And
Yeah.
that's not a good place to find yourself. So, and then what that builds is, the ability to have trust. And then ultimately, not right away. I mean, a founder's not going to give you autonomy, day one. You kind of work to earn that over the course of the first 9 to 12 months. But if things are going right, your autonomy will grow because you're delivering results. And that brings you to the next most important thing, which is people. The opportunity to bring in people that are experts in their field, that can live the culture, that have the same passion, and can grow this thing to the level that the founder and the board certainly anticipate.
Case could probably be made that Sabra was really, say, kind of a category defining brand that really brought hummus into the mainstream in the US. To a certain extent, I think Clio's making a similar bet on Greek yogurt bars with this new product that Sergey came up with. Assuming that kind of tracks with you, like what does it take to build a new category and a nine-figure brand in that category? And how is that different versus building in a more established category where it's probably a bit more of a red ocean, but people understand the category, they know what to look for. Yeah, what's different here, and maybe what are the pros and cons?
Yeah, so I think first you need a lot of courage because you're putting your career and your family to a certain extent on the line for a concept or an idea. And I go back to making sure that the product is actually solving for a need that's not out there, or you're creating a need based upon the consumer pulse that doesn't exist. So that's critical. And then, capturing the moment. Where is the consumer right now? What is the consumer looking for, and how does it match up to the product that you're bringing to the market? So in the case of Sabra, the hummus category, when I joined Sabra in 2007, was only about $80 million, and it was dominated by Athenos, which was a craft brand, and it was a sleepy category. In 2013, it's $1 billion category, and Sabra owned, more than 50% of it. So Sabra went from 10 million in sales to almost 500 million in sales in 7 years. What did Yehuda do? He created a product that was visually superior in a category that no one really knew about, except for your ethnic, a lot of ethnic folks. So you had a lot of you had Greeks, you had Muslims, you had Israelis, sort of getting it, but there was no product that really anglicized the flavor for Americans, where they could really understand it. And that tied into that whole romantic notion of food back in the early 2000s, where people were more willing to experiment, and it took off like a rocket. And I think in similar fashion, as we continue to close opportunities with Clio across multiple channels, we're seeing the same kind of consumer appreciation and takeaway. So I think with Yehuda and Sabra, it was highly innovative. It was beautiful to look at. It tasted great. There was nothing like it in the market. And then by bringing in the right people with the right passion, we were able to really, you can't even say that it was a category in 2007, but
Sure.
boy, in 2013 it sure was.
Going from 23 million to 120 million ish in 3 years is pretty quick. What broke first, and what were some of the biggest changes to the workflow or process that you've had to make along the way to actually set up the business to be able to hit that 120 million a year, going from 23 in only 3 years? And I'm sure it's building it to be able to go much further beyond 120.
Yeah, so just to be clear, the 120 million is our 2026 annual
Sure, fair enough.
operating
Okay.
plan.
Yeah,
This
thanks for
would
correcting.
this would technically be year four.
Okay.
Doesn't take away from the run rate, but
Not at
it's
all.
technically
Not at all.
technically year four. So when I joined Clio, we were selling basically single bars. So we were selling bars that retailers like Walmart were retailing for $1.18 or $1.29. That was sort of the portfolio. And it was at a time where, like a lot of new companies, and I didn't mention this earlier, but cash flow is king. So it's as important as any of the other things that I talked about. So as we're building this business and investing in equipment and capital and people, we were selling these little single boxes, and it was not generating, enough revenue. So one of the first things that we really focused on was, let's not sell singles to retailers. Let's sell multi-packs to retailers. And so we were able to, take a single, and make it a 4-pack. And then we sold our 8-pack minis to go with the 4-packs. And so instead of selling stuff at $1.50 to $1.69, we were, $4.99 to $5.99, which was generating more revenue. Got a lot of pushback internally around those changes because people didn't think that little Clio had the leverage to convince the trade that it'd be better, to sell a multi-pack. The bet was that within 18 months or so, we generate the same velocities on the 4-packs that we were generating on the singles. And thankfully that's exactly what happened. So that was the first real big bet. And that began to help us solve our cash issues. It also made us more profitable in the eyes of the retailer from a gross profit per,
Hmm.
per linear. So we became overnight, as we began to ramp up our velocities, selling at $5.99 and turning more meaningful to the retailer. So we didn't get pushback. And now you'll find almost exclusively retail supermarkets and mass merchandisers. You'll see our 4-packs and our minis. But we took the singles and we went in a different direction. So we said, we're not going to discontinue the singles. We're going to develop a multi-channel capability and get into food service. So I was able to attract Scott Thews, who worked with me at Sabra, and he's the gentleman who ran our food service operation, responsible for the sale of the Sabra grab-and-go hummus with the pretzels, which are everywhere. So I brought in Scott, and because Scott knew that business so well, it's a different food service, is a different business. And Adam, I know you know that, but he knew how to do it. So today you're going to find us in 450 colleges and universities, over 20,000 doors in C-stores, over 65 airports, as we continue to build out this food service capability using those singles, to help make that happen. So that's been, a wonderful play for us.
When you brought the concept to retailers initially of moving to these multi-packs, did they have any resistance at all? Or were they immediately like, yeah, this totally makes sense. Let's make this switch as soon as possible?
We were blessed because I can't think of a retailer
That's
that
awesome.
pushed back
That's
in
great.
any significant way. And I think it was all about the fact that they thought that the product had legs. And just like us, they wanted to generate more revenue and more gross margin. So, yeah, you know, we had really very little, if any, headwinds
That's awesome.
around that change.
That's great.
And then that led to beginning to really grow quickly. And then we had a capital raise. I think had we not gone to the multi-packs, we would not have gotten the confidence from the investors. And I don't know what would have happened,
Yeah.
because we just never would have been able to generate the cash. And of course, now we're, double digit EBITDA, strong margin, self-funding, thankfully.
Great.
So
Man.
it's been a great journey. And the other thing that happened at the same time that we went to multi-packs is I was able to attract really, really top talent to the company. So, I see this as a team sport. So, having the right lead in finance, the right lead in ops, the right lead in sales and marketing and HR is absolutely critical. And I always, have the mantra, get functional experts, get people that are smarter than you, and just work together as a team. And as long as everyone is sort of within the culture and is passionate about the culture of the company, there's so much you can do. Sky's the limit. So I've been blessed along those lines too, in terms of people that have followed me throughout my career, but also the newer people that I've been able to bring in here, and we're having a ball.
That's awesome. In general, what is the kind of journey or process look like internally at Clio that ultimately leads to the decision to say, okay, we feel like there's enough data here, enough justification for us to go through the whole process of bringing a new SKU to market?
Yeah, so we do. We have brought new SKUs to market. Most recently, we brought salted caramel and cookies and cream. Believe it or not, as a brand, we have 70 ACV, which
Oh,
is
wow.
hard to believe.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard to believe. But when you look at the items, that's where the opportunity is. So our top 14 customers, we average about 3.8 SKUs, and we really need to be 6 or 7.
Hmm.
And so that's the work that continues. The title of your company really speaks to the merchandising opportunity that is in front of us. Consider that when I first joined, many retailers just assumed we were like a yogurt. So they threw these single boxes in with Chobani and Dannon, and it was just lost. So what we've been doing lately with category management, scan data, is really building a story with the trade around creating a refrigerated snack set, typically adjacent to yogurt, but also adjacent to desserts. because that's, we think, where the consumer would look to find that footprint. And so we spent a lot of time trying to build with the trade as our partner, the best way to merchandise this profitable snack category that can be proven to be incremental for the refrigerated case, especially given the high retails and the low space that it occupies. So, we've talked to some of what people might call our competitors in this area and encourage them to work with us and help create this dynamic. So it's a work in progress. We have some accounts like Market Basket with 12 items on the shelf. We've got great distribution at Walmart, for example, but the average is only about 3.5 per
Okay.
store. But as we grow and we can show velocity gains, we gain the trust of the retailer and we're able to expand our distribution and as a result, create that footprint for our consumers.
The latest seasonal flavor, which I think was pina colada, which I've not tried yet, but need to get my hands on that one.
I just saw the order sheet today. It's shipping this week.
Are
Yeah,
any
so
going out to Lund's or Whole Foods by any chance? Do you know?
I believe you will find them. Yes.
Perfect. All right, great.
Yeah, so what's nice about the seasonal guys
Yeah.
is, especially like with the pumpkin play. So what happens with the pumpkin play is a lot of retailers put that in their end caps, during the fall. And so Clio now is elevated to an end cap position with the SKU. And we're met by consumers who don't even know who the hell we are, right? So they try it, and the next thing you know, they come back to the regular case and they're buying vanilla and strawberry and cookies and cream or whatever is on the shelf. So it helps to build awareness about the brand and get people to try it. So these seasonal programs have been very good for Clio, and every year, they're growing.
Do you have a process in place or I don't know what the best term is, like a checklist that says, or maybe you were thinking about doing so, where you introduce a seasonal flavor and it hits certain metrics for a long enough period of time where you say, okay, this one is showing enough promise. We need to convert this to a permanent SKU.
Not a seasonal flavor. We keep seasonal flavors as seasonal flavors because we're afraid that it would lose that impact.
Yeah, for sure.
But however, the other way to look at it is that some of our particularly club customers come and visit us and they talk about, why don't we try this? Why don't we try that? Why don't we try cookies and cream? Why don't we try cake batter? Why don't we try, I don't know, we think of a flavor, peach, cherry. So we'll launch it in like a club pack, and that's not a seasonal flavor. And then if it's
Mhm.
successful, then we'll look to commercialize it once we do the work with the consumer testing and everything, and we'll bring that flavor to market if it's so successful in club that it's obvious that there's a consumer need or desire for that flavor. So yeah, part of our innovation comes from running special exclusive packs for club to support their interests, and as a result, it supports our interests, and that's a good.
Cold chain, from what I know, is one of the more challenging verticals within CPG. What would you say are the keys to running a brand in a cold chain category successfully at nine figures and above and growing quickly? And what do most operators maybe miss?
I can't say what most operators might
Okay,
miss,
fair.
but I know that the learning here has been, you start behind you. You start with your supply chain. And we've developed a very robust S&OP, sales and operation platform, working with NetSuite and really holding people accountable on the forecasting side of the business because it's so essential. If your forecasting is wrong, you're either disappointing the customer or you're scrapping out profit. So, we're experiencing, believe it or not, in the refrigerated environment, a 98% service level, on a 52-week basis, which really speaks to our operational group and this whole S&OP process. So securing ingredients and packaging at the right time, at the right place, and making sure that you're producing it on time, because the second thing you're limited by is shelf life. So, you need to get the product out there in the very early days so that you're guaranteeing the best possible freshness for your consumer. And then when you're working with your distributors and retailers, really working hard on, working with them on FIFO issues, order management issues, making sure, they have just the right amount of what they need, working with scan data to kind of tie it all back together, working with your brokers on some of the bigger customers to make sure that from their perspective, they're getting it right from the customer. Here's what we think we're going to need, and then building it out into the broader supply chain capability. So it can be done. It can be done, very successfully, but it takes a lot of effort and really people drive that thing. And then we celebrate the success. And when we have an issue, we do a learning and we learn from it and continue to improve.
Yeah. You mentioned S&OP process. I feel like that's such an important part of running a company effectively. What does a well-run S&OP process and cadence look like in your mind?
So we run S&OP once a month, and we brought in a young technical expert. So we used to just take like the sales forecast, sit down with the operations people, and sort of come to an agreement on what might happen. But now it's become we still have that, but it becomes quite the technical affair. So it's all fed into a database, and we can immediately see the enhancements and the improvement. It's also a lot of communication around promotion, new item availability, when it's going to ship, what are the ups and downs in the business, so that we can make sure that we have the right inventory on hand at the right time, and we're not scrapping product or disappointing customers. So our S&OP includes, myself, our operations lead, our COO, our CFO, our CSO, our CMO, and a number of operational folks who support the effort on the technical side. And we scorecard every single month, and we're so far very happy with the results. I don't know how we could do it any other way.
You were talking about how in the early days, the product was getting lost, sitting in the section, getting lost behind a bunch of other yogurts and whatnot. And now when I go to the store, I see it sitting in next to the Midday Squares of the world and some of these other refrigerated snacks, which just seems like it's a good place for the brand to be. Like, yeah, where in the store, in the retail environment, do you want the brand to sit where you feel like it performs the best?
I think, as I mentioned earlier, I think you want to be adjacent to yogurt, but also adjacent to dessert. We see the dessert category struggling a little bit as people are migrating toward snacks, and with GLP-1, they seem to be migrating more toward GLP-1. By the way, just came along. I mean, it certainly helped spur our growth, Perfect Bar's growth, but it wasn't the cause of the growth. But we're happy we're happy to support it.
Sure.
So I think that footprint, that snack footprint between yogurt and dessert would be ideal, because that's where the consumer is traveling. I think back to where bars were, and I've been in the business a long time. So I used to, work for American Home Foods in the grocery selling Chef Boyardee, and I'd go into the stores, and back then they were just beginning to bring in these little protein bars or granola bars, and nobody knew where to put them. Like, should they go buy cereal because there's granola in them? Should they go buy cookies? Should they go buy candy? Should they go buy peanuts? And now when you go into a store, a whole aisle is devoted to
Yeah.
bars.
Yeah.
So we see the same thing, opportunity refrigerated for fresh bars, because people want to migrate to fresh, more flavorful solutions, fresher solutions. And so we think that the retailers who recognize that are a bit ahead of the game. And we do strive to remind them that these bars can be incremental, because either you're getting new consumers to the store entirely, or you're stealing from your buddies in grocery and building up your refrigerated business. So yeah, that would be ideal. And then ultimately having this destination where a consumer knows exactly where to go. That's one of the things that we're seeing is our online sales are off the charts.
Wow.
So, I'll say customer A is looking for 25% of their sales in refrigerated to be online, right? We're doing 38. So it's easier to find us online because we have the same amount of space as Giovanni than it is sometimes in the store. So, our goal is to try to win on both sides. We want to continue to grow the online because it's so important, but we really do need to work with these other companies like Perfect Bar and Midday Squares and begin to build this new snacking destination in refrigerated. We don't look at them as competitors. We hope to look at them as collaborators.
Yeah. I love that. Clio owns and operates a vertically integrated facility. I think that's around 90,000-ish square feet.
86,000. Yeah.
86,000. Cool. I was close.
Yes.
Yeah. Walk just Walk me through a bit of that decision to own manufacturing versus what I might call like the more prototypical kind of running an asset light co-packer model, and try to sticking with that as long as possible. Like what's kind of the yeah, what was kind of the thought process of going vertical in the more earlier days?
So in fairness, Sergey started the company with a commitment to make the product, himself or
That makes
ourselves.
sense.
I've been with companies, with co-packing, and I've been with companies that manufacture themselves. There's a huge difference in my mind with being close to your manufacturing, close to your quality, close to your safety, and being able to be in control of the innovation process from A to Z, controlling your own inventory, and then you're fully accountable yourself for delivering the best possible product. Nobody. I'm not suggesting that co-packers take shortcuts. Don't get me wrong, but I almost think it's like your own family versus a niece or nephew. It's just different. And the love that you have for the fact that you manufacture it yourself, I think people take great pride in it. And it also from a learning standpoint, I've learned so much just being closer to, how we manufacture product, why we do it the way we do, what the issues are, what the challenges are. I just think you're just in a superior position.
What did the financing look like for that facility?
Well, it started out with Sergey, and then
Okay,
Sergey
fair.
had an angel investor, and then ACG came in.
Okay,
They sort of represent the board, and I'm sure they feel really good about their investment right now.
I'm
We did
sure.
do a raise. We did do a raise right after I mentioned the multi-packs and bringing in new people, and that really got us aligned. And now we're self-funded. We just put in a sixth line in our facility. It's self-funded, and as we move down the road, we're leased here through 2032. And we feel like as we invest in new equipment, new machinery, new capital, and grow, we have the capacity to get us there. And we look at the capital investments as being self-funding from this point forward. Certainly, things can change, but from a financial, from a cost structure standpoint, we're we're paying as we go.
Clios and roughly 60,000 doors total. 20 to 30,000 of those are retail. What would you say are kind of the differences and the keys from scaling from, let's just say, roughly like 1,000 doors to 10,000 doors versus the next phase up going from 10,000 to 20, 30,000 doors?
So I think I don't know that it's really different.
Okay.
So if you start with retailer A, and you're able to show through data that you're adding value to the category, you're adding profit to the category, consumers are responding to the brand, you take that information to retailer B without telling them who retailer A is. And suddenly you're building, a brand from the standpoint of the category. Like, we wouldn't just go and say, hey, buy Clio. We would go and say, hey, you've had a lot of success with Perfect Bar, for example. Here's a brand that doesn't compete with Perfect Bar. It can sit alongside a Perfect Bar and drive incremental sales. And let us show you. So you start with 2 items, maybe 3, and then you go to 5. And then as you begin to gain momentum, you take that story to other retailers, and some adapt extremely quickly, and some they just don't believe until later in the game, and then they come on board, and they have the same success. So, and then in the meantime, as you grow, you're able to build out your marketing capabilities, and you're now talking to the consumer in new ways on social media. You're building household penetration, repeat and trial, and so it from that point it begins to mushroom. And when you can take that whole story, now you're going from 10,000 to 30,000 stores, 30,000 to 60,000 stores. And then if you're multi-channel, and they can find you in, retailers, they travel too. So they have kids in college, and they go to airports, and now they see us in airports. They see us in C-stores when they get their coffee. Their kids are talking about this great product in the college and university. So it begins to become common, let's say, for retailers, to want to stock your product, but you have to
Yeah,
earn it every day. I mean,
sure.
You absolutely have to earn it through your supply chain. You have to make sure you keep the consumer engaged and hit those velocity targets that the retailer is demanding of you.
On the topic of those velocity targets, what have you found for Clio has had the biggest and is continuing to have the biggest impact from a velocity standpoint, and whether it's, demos or TPRs or something of the like? Yeah, what have you felt like has had the biggest impact?
Shelf position. Having the right number of items on the shelf in a place where the consumer can easily find us.
Yeah,
It's like every boat rises.
totally.
The caramel sells more, but the vanilla now sells more. The strawberry sells more. The cookies and cream sell more.
Right.
And it becomes a Clio house party.
Totally.
So that's really the thing now for us is most important thing is shelf merchandising.
Yeah, that makes sense. That totally makes sense. Key part of scaling, really scaling up in retail is partnering with the right distributors and brokers. From your perspective, how can a brand truly partner with their distributor to really maximize success and really be a true partner to them from the brand side?
I think communication is a really big part. Owning the relationship, you know, owning your supply chain metrics to the distributor gives you the opportunity to hold them accountable to theirs. So it's great that you got it to the distributor on time, but if their fill rates to your customer are weak, there's a problem, and you have to be able to sit down and talk about the problems, and then fight. Oh, you really need to make sure the distributor has your best interest in mind, and they're rotating your product and making sure that those code dates that are going out into the world, are the right code dates at the right time. So, yeah, we work with some great distributors, Dot, KE, UNFI, and as we grow and become more meaningful to some of these retailers, certainly we're moving more into a direct relationship with many of them who are now putting us in their own warehouse. But we're always going to need these distributor partners so that we can get to the entirety of the market. On the broker side, I was a broker for a while actually, and a good broker. You know a good broker by who they represent and what those brands are doing in the geography in which they represent them.
Hmm.
In my opinion, we're too small to be a direct sales organization at this point. Maybe we'd get, one appointment a month, whereas the broker's in there every week. And frankly, if it's an important account, I want to know when the buyer has a cold. So,
Sure.
well, not me anymore, but our CSO certainly
Sure.
does.
Right.
So just having that hands-on understanding, and then working together so that you have the attention of the leadership, so that you have the right points of accountability, and that can be done through incentive programs and other things that are mutually beneficial. So I don't shy away from working with a solid broker. In many instances, I think it's a better case scenario than what a direct person might be able to offer at this stage of our development.
Last question for you, John. You know the CBG space very well. Any brands in particular or just categories in general outside of Clio's category that have just kind of piqued your interest lately? Things that you've been watching and all just because they seem interesting?
Yeah, so it's interesting that in the yogurt category, it's a $12 billion category in the U.S. And there's this segment of the yogurt category which they call kids, which is about $1 billion, and it's kind of stagnant. Even though yogurt's growing, the kids segment's kind of static. So we are actually this month shipping a brand new product, 3 SKUs of kids product. It's yogurt coated, so it's different colors. So it's like a cotton raspberry and a strawberry dream, and then there's a drizzle on top, like chocolate, and it tastes great. And really, what we found in the research, and this is coming directly from the trade, is that they felt like ages 2 to 6 was covered. There was a real gap between 6 and 13.
Interesting.
And that's really the segment that we're going after with a Greek yogurt bar that has 5 grams of protein. So moms and dads, kids need, 12-year-old kids need about 30 grams of protein a day. So, we're offering 5. So we're in a kind of unique, rare air among the kids category. And boy, if we can carve out 5% of that business, it's a $40 million opportunity. So we're very focused on this. We've gotten some great early news from accounts. As I said, we're already shipping it to a few this month. But when you look across the country, some of the biggest retailers are jumping on this, and they see this as an opportunity for new growth. So yes, stand by to see that. It's something we've been looking at for 3 years, and it finally came to fruition here this month.
That's exciting. Definitely going to keep an eye out for that. Well, yeah, John, this has been awesome. Really great insights here. Super appreciate you making the time. What's the best place for people to follow along with you and all your expertise? And then where's the best place for people to follow along with the Clio brand these days as well?
I think, the same old, LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, but mostly go to the store and buy the product.
There you go. Perfect.
That's the best way to follow us.
Love it. Cool. Well, John, yeah, this has been great. I really appreciate the time. Yeah, I think that's the pod.